We're going.
Ballpark Nation presents. Welcome to Go Astros, your look at the two-time World Series champions from three guys who have been here since Art Howe had hair.
Well, that was weird. It went live automatically, so I guess we're geared up to start. This is Go Astros. It is a jollier edition of Go Astros, I think, for some of us. As usual, I'm joined by the other two amigos. We've got Lucky Day in Andy Tomcheson. How are you, Andy, this morning?
I'm in a place that has power, so that's a new and unique situation for me based since last Thursday. So, yay, air conditioning.
How about this cold air coming out, huh? Pretty neat.
It's a miracle, and if there is a God, it's a God of air conditioning.
All right. Brian Arbor, how can you tell that it's a mail plane?
I don't know.
Because of its little balls. How are you, Brian, up there in the Northeast?
I'm relatively fine compared to, well, people like Andy and other people I know in Houston without power. Love and hugs to everybody in that situation.
Yeah, and we said it in our short hop from last week, but we'll talk about it again at the end of the show. But if you were untouched by the storms, you know, there are organizations you can find to help donate and help people get going. I drove through Houston on Saturday, and the two things struck me. One, how bad the destruction was, but really how intermittent it was. Like I guess a true tornado was, you would have an entire block not touched and then another block completely wrecked. And so, yeah, Andy, it was pretty crazy just to drive through and see it all.
Well, and a point of order, it was a straight line storm and probably a derecho. I'm not pronouncing that right. But one of my neighbors pulled out a drone, and in our neighborhood, you could see a diagonal path across the neighborhood, and all the trees were blown down in the exact same direction.
Wow.
So a little bit different than the tornadic action you would expect from, tornadoes having things all over the place. But we had a down tree and an uprooted tree and an exploded tree, and we're down 2 cars. But all the dogs and the people are safe, and they're important in that order. By the way, dogs are.
I was just going to say, I'm really glad that's the order that we got them in. Well, look, guys, we had talked about the talent of this team and the ability to, for as poorly as they played, to automatically play up to their potential. They've more than done that. They are crediting a team meeting on the plane to Mexico, which I know team meetings exhaust a lot of people, and who knows, but they've definitely turned it around. They now stand 4 games behind Seattle. And more importantly, if you go, or not more importantly, I guess, as importantly, if you go look at FanGraphs, the projections are starting to creep back up about whether they'll be projected to win the division and are still one of the 3 favorites in the AL to go to the World Series. So, Andy, we're starting with you. What have you seen that's been different?
If you would have told me that 2 outfielders were going to carry the baseball team through the month of May, I would have said that sounds right. If you had told me one of those was going to be Jake Myers, I would have been flabbergasted and assumed you were on some sort of drugs. Since in the last 15 days especially, Kyle Tucker and Jake Myers are destroying baseballs at a pretty rapid clip. 1.398 OPS for Tucker and a 1.124 for Jake Myers. I'm not quite ready to anoint Jake Myers the savior of the franchise, as some of Twitter has started doing already, because there seems to be a big "I told you so" contingent that has popped up in the last couple of weeks. But credit where credit's due. He's playing well. He's playing defense, which he has always done. He's taking better reads to balls. But at the plate, where he's making the difference right now is he seems to have a very good concept of what he wants to do. He's getting on base. He's hitting for power, which don't necessarily need him to do. But getting on base and making things happen at the plate, I mean, it's a very nice development that you couldn't have really expected to happen even a month ago.
Yeah, and of course, the nature of a baseball season, he's going to slump, and then those other "I told you so" people will jump on, and then he'll come out of the slump, and then that's how it's going. Hey, Brian, what has been one of the biggest surprises for you in this little stretch that we've had going?
I guess it's not a surprise, but I think the key has been that they've finally gotten started pitching. That they are at the beginning of the year, they were getting some really terrible starts. And we'll highlight that Spencer Arrighetti got 2 wins this week. Okay, wins is not critical as a stat, but it speaks to he's pitched, in his first couple starts, you could sort of see the promise, and then he wouldn't be able to sustain it into like the fourth or fifth inning, second or third time through the order. He's gotten better. I mean, the rotation's gotten healthier, and they keep getting good starts, not necessarily great starts, but good starts during this thing. And if they can do that, they hit well enough that is that's a formula for winning.
Brian, one of the things that has been kind of beaten up again is there's a lot of real not wanting to give. It's normal for sports fans to give Dana Brown all the failure or blame for all the failure, but not credit. And he had said after they had whiffed on Blake Snell, I guess, that there's a lot of internal options that can help keep the pitching staff going. And it turns out that there were. I mean, a lot of these names that are keeping this stuff going are either under the radar signings like Scott or Seth Martinez is stepping up. And it seems like they're now playing, and those guys are meeting the challenge.
Yeah, with the bullpen, and I talked about this during the offseason, the strategy wasn't to, they put all their money into one guy, Josh Hader, but sort of they backfilled the middle and bottom of the bullpen with, we're just going to go get a bunch of guys and we're going to sort through them and find someone who works. And the person who has worked in particular has been Taylor Scott, and that's been real impressive. I put out a Substack this weekend on the bullpen and looking at how they've improved recently, particularly in their ERA, though always the numbers were good. But Taylor Scott's one of those people. He's striking out a lot of batters. He's keeping the ball in the ballpark. That's a definite win for Dana Brown, because my guess is, Jim Crane has a lot of influence on the big name players, not so much on, who the last guy in the bullpen is. That's a Dana Brown special, and he deserves credit for that one.
Well, I would like to point out something, Andy, that Jessica was the first person on the planet to notice. One, that Kyle Tucker had worn orbit-colored sneakers yesterday or cleats for his birthday, and then he came out to bat the fourth time, and first of all, she was like, I think he struck out 3 times looking, and I was like, yeah, he has. And then she walked out, and she was like, are his shoes different? And I had sort of made the joke that if it were Bregman, he would have changed his shoes, and he did change the shoes, and then he hit 2 home runs. Sometimes, man, it's the footwear.
If you think that you're on a winning streak because you're wearing women's lingerie, you are.
It's because you are, yeah.
I think before we get to that, another point for not criticizing Dana Brown as much, you have to give Josh Miller some credit when things go well, because nobody was expecting Taylor Scott to be much of anything when that signing was made. And our coaching staff does continue to put our pitchers in advantageous situations, especially off the proverbial scrap heap of Major League Baseball. There usually is a guy a year where they find and they've converted some things. As far as, noticing shoes, I don't know that we're setting the women's movement forward, if that being the thing that she noticed, but at least we weren't talking about Kyle Tucker's butt, which I know is also a topic.
Well, he's a left-handed batter, and we sit down the third base side, so we really couldn't get appreciation for that.
If it works for him, and he lost his ability to decide to wear batting gloves or not because of the pitch clock, supposedly. So if it's shoes now, whatever. If he wants to wear a different jock strap every at bat, knock yourself. I don't care. Keep leading the American League in home runs. You can do whatever. You can be eccentric when you're successful in the major leagues. Otherwise, it's just fungus on your shower shoes.
It is important to make adjustments at this level.
It's important, whatever those adjustments are, whether it's Bregman shaving a mustache between innings or that. So Bregman, there was an interview with Brian McTaggart last week about simplifying his approach, and all of a sudden he's hitting again. There's still, for me, it's still cautious optimism, but, and Andy, we'll start with you. Are you is your emotional hole, are you out of the emotional hole yet? We talked on all season about there being an actual hole, of which they are really close to getting themselves out of. And then the emotional hole, I'm probably still in the emotional hole where I'm waiting for something to go wrong. Where are you with this team at this point? What's your confidence level like?
If last week it was like a 4, I'm probably at a 6. And I feel better after this weekend, and nothing against the Astros sweeping the A's, but the A's are a bad team with not a lot of talent. the Astros were a bad team with a lot of talent. There is some light at the end of the tunnel in that sort of situation. So beating up on the A's doesn't do a lot for me other than collect wins in the win column, and we certainly needed that. The Brewers are a really good team, and the Brewers play really fundamentally sound baseball most of the time. And to beat them 2 out of 3, and really you had a chance to win all 3, that was a much better step for me. I don't know how much we're going to learn this week if the Astros go on a 6-game winning streak against Oakland and Los Angeles. Reverse that, but because both those teams are pretty bad, like we just mentioned. But that puts them right into a 4-game series in Seattle for potentially at least a 500 record by the end of the month, but also maybe the division lead by the end of the month if things fall the right way. So emotionally, I feel a little bit more protected than I was. It's a little safer. And that's saying something considering that I lost 2 cars this week to a storm that nobody saw coming.
Yeah.
Safety's fun.
Brian, to his point, though, it was pointed out that the Astros had by far the toughest schedule of the division in the first 40 games. These things do tend to balance themselves out. They are playing much better baseball. And yeah, Andy's right. Sweeping Oakland A's is one thing, but 2 of 3 against the Guardians, which is a good team this year, and 2 of 3 against Milwaukee should say that they are really at least reaching the point that we all expected where they can now hang with just about anybody.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a little bit more optimistic, I guess, than Andy, mostly because the pessimism was so real, right? That there was some. So, I mean, the other thing I'll sort of note here is they played poorly, particularly starting pitching, but there was some bad luck to the 7-19 start. And one area of that bad luck was in the bullpen. And they were striking guys out. They were just getting a lot of balls finding holes. And this week we had 2 games where the Monday game where Ronel Blanco got ejected after the 3rd inning and the bullpen had to cover 6 innings. That was Tuesday. And then the Friday game where they got 5 innings and they had to preserve a 1-run lead over 4, where the bullpen made really significant contributions. You could argue won both of those games. We didn't see any of that in the first 26 games of the season. So whatever they said on that plane to Mexico apparently worked to get the luck turned around for the bullpen, but they need that.
Okay, Andy, I want to talk about the Ronel Blanco situation, and I want to talk about it in relationship to the Glasnow situation in L.A. Look, I don't know what they found on Glasnow's hand. The fact is that it looked sticky from the video, but one of the things that frustrated me the most is they found sticky stuff inside Blanco's glove. It wasn't in the palm of his glove where it was deep down, like it clearly something had ran down into it. But he kept offering to show his hands, and the umpires didn't want to see the hands. How frustrated are you at this versus what did or didn't happen in L.A., or is it just sort of par for the course for you with the sets of rules in Major League Baseball?
Well, I think the issue with anything, it's like a bad strike zone. It's consistency. If you're consistent with your bad strike zone, players can adjust. I don't think the players know what the umpires are looking for. It's certainly inconsistent crew to crew. I don't think it's, Twitter aside, I don't think there's a conspiracy theory or conspiracy against the Astros to catch them doing something. But I
don't think that either. I do think there's a conspiracy that's going to treat some teams different when they're caught.
But there is a double standard when it comes to certain venues, certain teams, and certain umpiring crews. And if you had consistency, if every player was allowed to wash their hands when they were caught, if every player was allowed to do the same tests, basically, and every umpire was using the same decision-making metrics, that'd be fantastic. But the Major League Baseball Umpires Association is a very powerful organization. They have a group of employees who are above reproach because you cannot criticize them if you're a player or a coach without being thrown out of a game at best and suspended at worst. And there's no evaluation that's done externally to say these guys are good umpires, bad umpires. And so we end up with people like Laz Diaz and Angel Hernandez and CB Buckner. And the fact that we know these guys' names proves that they're not great umpires, because there are great umpires that you rarely hear about. It's the inconsistency that drives me crazy. And it couldn't have been pointed out any differently if it hadn't happened on the same night with Glasnow in Los Angeles and Blanco in Houston.
Yeah, and the CB Buckner, I mean, he's been behind the plate since 1996. Brian, is there a way this works? So first of all, you mentioned it already. The big detriment bullet was dodged. They didn't really need to go deep in the bullpen. They got a great performance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is there a bright side of this of saying, well, we've just given a rookie pitcher who's already thrown more innings than he's ever thrown a little bit of a breather at the middle of the beginning of the season when, we're going to be on the dog days before we know it?
Sure, you try to limit innings, and this is a artificial but externally imposed way to limit innings. So, yeah, there could be a benefit from that because Blanco's been among the team's best pitchers this year, and he was pitching very well in the game on Tuesday night. And again, yeah, I mean, so that's the biggest issue, I think, right now is this works against that, is they were planning to go into a six-man rotation during this stretch where basically they got all their off games around Mexico City around that trip. And so they were planning to go six-man rotation. They'll have to limit that, though they will get Blanco back later this week, at the end of this week, and can slot him in for that. So, there's a potential advantage with Blanco. There's a disadvantage in that they were trying to space out their starters and don't get to do that, and they get one less person on the roster for 10 days.
Yeah. One of the other things that broke out yesterday, Dana Brown on 740, not 740. Oh my God, how old school am I?
Wow.
740 KTRH was the home of the Astros.
Shout out to Jerry Trupiano.
Whoa.
Anita Martini would be proud of you.
First things first, there's rumor that Abreu is coming back, or at least he's leaving the complex league. Who knows what that means? But I'm a little concerned about it for many reasons. One, I think he only went 1 for 9 down there. But two, the team, it seems to be clicking now. Singleton has really elevated his play. Loperfido, all he's done since he's come up is hit 300. It seems like this version of the Astros that we've seen the last however many games is a really, really good baseball team, potentially better than the team we saw last year. And does the idea of bringing Abreu back concern you at all, Brian?
I mean, the alternative to bringing Abreu back is to releasing him, which is fine for me and fine for you and fine for Andy and our listeners, and not necessarily for the guy who has to pay him not to play. And so that's essentially sort of wasted money. So I think it's the financial pressure that they gotta try to get something out of this because they have so much sunk into Jose Abreu. And also they sent him down, he had to agree to go down. And part of his agreement to go down was not, I made the joke that he went to a farm upstate. But he gets a voice in this, unlike the dogs who go to a farm upstate. Apologies to those who had to lie to their children about that.
My grandparents took him to the farm.
Indeed. And, anyway, so yeah, he's probably got to come back. It does lead to a pressure point of like, how much can they, how much can they do it? They can absorb him a little better now that they're playing better. And hopefully they fixed him. I'm skeptical, but hopefully they fixed him. Actually, it was notable. We got bat speed data for the first time ever, and his bat speed wasn't awful. It doesn't seem to have been particularly slowed. His ability to square up pitches seems to be a big issue.
Yeah, Andy, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, he is going to play at least 2 more games this week. Whatever those simulated games, inter-squad games, whatever they are doing down there. So he will get some more at-bats besides I think the 9 that he's had. And the 1 hit was a double. So there's that. Off a guy who's going to be bagging groceries next week. Am I right? He's going to be given 1 more chance at the major league level. And it's probably 1 more than he probably deserves based on performance with the Astros. He's a really nice guy. He's a great teammate. All of his teammates love him. I don't wish him ill by any means.
No, however, I'd love for him to come back and rake. I just don't think it's going to happen.
But there's a point where you just can't hit a baseball anymore. It's the hardest thing to do in professional sports, and he might be at that point. I hope he's not. I hope he has a comeback for the ages for the rest of the season, and we have a real dilemma about, what do we do with him because he's so good? Do we put him up higher in the order? I don't think that's going to happen, and I think what you'll see is him being brought up sometime over the weekend on a road trip, and then probably by the All-Star break, a decision has to be made about a continued future, because at that point you're halfway through a 3-year contract. You've gotten everything you're going to get out of him, and they can probably weather that for the month of June. But I think that's Abreu's last gasp. And I think the best case would be that somebody wants to take a chance on him and give anything in a trade, with the Astros eating a giant part of that salary. So he comes up and he shows that, hey, I can still hit, and maybe somebody just really needs Jose Abreu in their clubhouse. And we're still paying most of that salary, though.
Yeah. Now, when he comes back, though, do you see a situation where it's automatically his starting job again, or do you think Singleton's going to get to play until he's not playing well anymore?
My guess is that they will continue to platoon like they were doing before Abreu was sent down, which is a shame because Singleton's competent at first base right now.
I'll be honest, he's beyond competent. Yesterday, he made 3 or 4 plays at first that Abreu simply would not have made.
And that's my issue, is that even offensively, if Abreu can get something close to league average, he's a negative from a defensive standpoint on a team that needs to play good defense. I don't see a fit for him on this team, but I know he's coming back, so I don't know how you balance that out. I think it'd be crazy to have him sitting on the bench and not playing, because I don't think that's any better for Jim Crane than just cutting him outright.
Yeah, to me, it seems like you spent the money. You might as well keep getting the wins and cut him. But you're right, Andy. It's not my money. But, Brian, there was at least 2 or 3 throws that Pena made a couple of great – no, actually, Pena and Altuve yesterday made a couple of great grabs and then were saved on the other end by Abreu making stretches and digs that we have simply seen Abreu not make. And so I had made the argument on this show before, I don't care if Singleton hits as long as he can play a competent defense, because we weren't getting that either. We've gotten both. How do you see it being divided when Abreu comes back up? I also think, to your point, there's a really good chance he went down there with a time limit built in. Yeah. Like you were saying, they had to agree. He's probably like, I'll go give you a couple of weeks and see what happens.
There's no way he agreed to that with a plan that, we're just going to leave you down there, because someone else will sign him with a chance to, do something. It may not work, but, he wants to be a major league player. He's sort of regardless, and that leaves a dilemma for the Astros. They'll probably platoon and do a job share at first base. Maybe give him a few at-bats a few starts against right-handed pitchers, but most of those will go to Singleton. They may use him as a pinch hitter against left-handers late. They don't have too many opportunities for that, but they could do that. It's a real limited role, because it's, he's not going to take DH at-bats away from Yordan. And, the good news is the outfield, which we thought would be an issue, Andy highlighted this earlier, is doing exceedingly well. We're going to get Chas McCormick back, I think, today. So hopefully that only strengthens the outfield. It creates some dilemmas for Joe Espada on playing time, but these are good problems, though problems to have to deal with.
Yeah, and I kind of hope the decision is to, for the most part, settle that that Myers is your center fielder. I don't think Dubon is a defensive plus out there, and I think you can still give Dubon at-bats like we talked about on the show by just rotating him around the diamond. Last question before we get out of here. We do have a bit shorter show today. Not only are we learning a lot about the Astros, but we have seen, for example, Seattle and definitely Texas, which, by the way, shout out to our buddy Archbishop DeShays, who, when the Rangers were booed off their field 2 days ago, said, I don't think they were booed because they were losing. They were booed because somehow an interracial couple made the kiss cam. That's what you expect down there at All Lives Matter Field, as he likes to call it. But Andy, what have we learned? Like, it seems like the Mariners are much like the Rangers. Anytime they play a team that is good, they do not win. What does that tell you about the state of the division and the Astros' ability to actually maybe win the division as comfortably as we had sort of expected?
The Mariners are an interesting situation to me because they have probably the best pitching staff in baseball. I don't know if the results quite bear that out yet, but they have all the talent in the world, especially from their starters. That's their strength. But they seem to have sacrificed offense in every one of their offseason moves. They get rid of guys who can hit and bring guys who might hit. And then you compound that with Julio Rodriguez, sorry, having a really bad start to the season. The kind of bad start that you would kind of think that is at a Bregman level bad start. It's not great. And he's supposed to be your guy that carries your team offensively. And it's been a lot of fits and starts for them. I think eventually the offense for them smooths out a little bit, but they're only going to go as far as their pitching can carry them. And eventually over the course of a season, they're going to give up games because they just don't score enough runs. And you've seen that throughout baseball. I think they're beatable in 2 weeks, but it really depends on what Astros team is playing at that point. Is it the one we've gotten for the last 15 days? I hope so. Is it the one that we got for the 30 days before that? I hope not. So there's going to be a lot of interesting storylines for the remainder of this season. The Astros have put themselves back in a position where they're 4 games back with a ton of games to play. More importantly to me, they're now just 3.5 games out of the wild card, which 2 weeks ago, it was an insurmountable mountain for them to be in the wild card conversation. And now that's not such a big deal. So playing Oakland 4 games certainly helps. But to your point, playing Cleveland well, playing Milwaukee well, tells you more about what this kind of team can be. And so I'm excited about what's to come in the next few weeks.
Especially when you look at the next 6 weeks, you've really got a tough series with Seattle. You have a tough series with Baltimore, but the rest of those series look very, very manageable for the Astros. And I think you're going to start to see things evening out. This is unfortunately a shorter show. So for Andy Zip and at Orange Fire, make sure you follow both those guys on Twitter. I am Jim Christopher. We will see Brian and I apparently are going to see you throughout the week. Andy doesn't do short hops. He's only here for the big things because he's too much power for shortness. We will see you, and we're all back next Monday. Till then, go Stros.
Go Astros.
Go Astros.